Hey guys, so I had a question of somebody saying that how can they build this migration for all these different tables and relations. So let's do that in this tutorial. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we are going to create a new folder, let's say database tutorial, and then let's get into it. Then we're going to install a Laravel project with Composer. Create project Laravel, and then let's call it DB tutorial.
Now that it's finished, let's go into it.
Oops, spelling mistake. Yes. Okay, we have to wait for it to finish, and once it's gonna be finished, then we get into that project and we're going to get into the project. So here it is. Now we have to first of all configure the database so that it opens up our database, and the first thing we're gonna do is that we are going to edit the database. So let's go into an editor, open this file, and edit the credentials for the database. Okay, I use Visual Studio Code to edit it, so I open the project here and I'm just gonna fill in the database connection. In this case, I'm gonna be using MySQL. Okay, so here I'm just gonna replace this with some generic MySQL stuff, and here I'm gonna create a new database and I'm gonna call it DB tutorial. Okay, so of course I have to go into MySQL and create the actual table. So let's go ahead and do that. Here, let's just go here and then create a new one, DB tutorial. Okay, let's open it. So here we are. It has no tables, it doesn't have anything, right? So the first thing we're going to do is that we are going to run PHP artisan migrate so that it creates these default tables that Laravel needs. So now if we go here and we refresh, we should see that it created all these tables on the database. Now we have to go into the actual tables that we need to create, which are basically these. So how do we go to create these ones? Let's go ahead now and start analyzing first of all what are the relationships between all of these tables. So it seems like the main table is the book table, and it has another table called categories, which it's connected with the category ID. It also has authors, and it will have author ID and a book ID, and then here actually this book author, I'm not sure how is it different from this one, but it doesn't matter to us because the relationships are pretty clear. It doesn't matter the name. Here it's borrow, so who borrowed the book, and here is the member and all that stuff. So let's start first of all with the book migration. So if we go to the book migration, let me put this on the side. We're gonna do PHP artisan make migration, and then here is where we're going to put the name of the migration. So let's call it something like create books table. So here it is created. Now let's go into our editor, and in our editor we're going to go into the migration. Okay, here is our books migration schema. It only has the ID, which in this case would represent the book ID. So all the tables primary key are going to be called ID. That's kind of like a standard in Laravel. You can also name it something else, but we're going to stick to ID. So here, this is pretty much the book ID. This is the timestamp that comes default with Laravel. And now here we're going to write the other things that we need. For example, title is something we need. It's going to be a string. Then we're gonna need title a pub year. So here we're gonna just call it publisher year, and we're just gonna keep it as string just to keep things simple. But if you here need to change it to like a date for the pub year, that's fine. But here we just want to do the relationships, right? So here, yes, we want to do the ISBN. We also want to do the category ID. So for the category ID, we are going to use a foreign key. So how we do the category ID with the foreign key? Let's look a little bit into that. So first of all, let's create our syntax for a foreign key and category ID. So the syntax would be something similar to this, but here we're gonna call it category ID. And then we're gonna remove the cascade on delete because we're not gonna worry about that right now. And we're gonna leave it like this for now. Now Laravel, if you have a table called category, and inside that category you have a column primary that is ID, Laravel by default will know which table this category ID belongs to. It means table category, and then use the column ID on that table. But that table doesn't exist yet because we haven't written the migration to create that table yet, right? So the first thing we're gonna do here is then create a category table. So we can either create a new migration that goes and run it, or we can create the category before this one. So we can create a category table before this one. But I'm just curious to see what happens if I actually run this without the category table existing. So let's go ahead and do that and see what happens. So let's go back to the terminal and let's run the migrate and see what happens. So it did create me the table. Let's check it out. Books table, and then if we see the structure, you can see that it has a category ID big int, and then you can see that it is a foreign key to something, but the table doesn't really exist, right? So I think it still understands it, and once we create the category table, it will get it. But on the safe side, it will be easier. Oops. On the safe side, I think it would be easier if we just created the table here, but because we call create book tables the migration, I don't think we should create it right here. So let's create a new migration that has the categories table in it, and then we can use it. So let's open up the image. Here is the category table. It has a description, a name, and a cat ID. So let's go ahead and create a migration called create category table. Now let's go ahead and edit that category table. So here we have the ID, the timestamp, and now we have to add we need the name, and this autocomplete that you see is called Copilot, which is from GitHub, and it helps you autocomplete code really easy. So let's go to the description. Like, it already knows the thing. So now that we have this created, now we can go ahead and run the migration, and we can see our category table created. We go back to the database, refresh. We have category, and here it is. And here, now the relationship of Laravel will assume that the books and category ID maps to that category table. So I think it would be on the safe side better to create the category table before the books table. That way you don't run the risk of Laravel not knowing. But I think Laravel still knows and understands, because, or the other thing that we can do is that, let's see, okay, actually let's go ahead and create the rest of the tables, and at the end of the day we'll see if it works or it doesn't. So now let's go ahead and create, so we have here author that has author ID, which is the primary key of this one. We have name, birthday, nationality. Here we have book author to map the relationship between which book is which author. So here is the book ID, which is a foreign key to this one. We have the author ID, which is a foreign key to this one. And then we have a book author ID, which is the ID of this one. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to create the author table. So let's put it aside. Let's go ahead and create that table. Create author table. Let's go into the code. Now here it already has the ID mapped to it, and let's create the other. So we need a name, yes. We need let's call it birthday. And this should not be a string. This should be a date type, but we want to keep things simple. Right now we're going to just keep it string just for demo purposes. So let's go ahead now and create and then let's create the nationality. Yep, nationality. And then we're going to, what are we missing? We have name, we have birthday, we have nationality, and we have the ID. I think these are all that we need. So let's go ahead and run it and create it. Okay, so check it out. Here's the author. Here is everything that we need. Now let's create the relationship table, which has two foreign keys, and let's put it here. This one, so it's going to have the author ID, and it's also going to have the book ID connecting here and then here. So let's go ahead and create this one. So let's call it create book author table, and let's no, before we run it, let's go ahead and edit it. So let's go here. Okay, so it already has the ID. Now let's go ahead and create the relationship. So one thing that we need is that foreign key that it's going to map to our book ID, and the cascade on delete, we're not going to worry about that right now. And also we're going to do the same thing with the author ID, and it's going to know that it needs to map the ID of the author table. That's why it's the foreign ID. So I think these are all the columns that we need. Let's go ahead and create it. Okay, now let's go into the database. Let's refresh, and we have book author. Let's take a look at the structure. So here we have book ID and author ID, and I know that here the foreign key says empty, but it really is. As you can see here, it has the book ID and the author ID as indexes, and it is a foreign key to those tables. And Laravel knows. Laravel knows when you create the migration. That way Laravel knows because of this. So now let's go ahead and create the other tables, which was the next one. We're missing two more tables. We have the borrow table that has a borrow ID, which is a primary key ID. It has a book ID, which points to this one. And then it has a member ID. So it has two foreign keys, so let's create it at the end. Let's first of all create this one, which is a members table. It has a name, the ID, which is the primary email, join date, and phone. So let's go ahead and create that one. Member table. Now let's go ahead and edit it. Okay, so here, let me open up the image so I know which columns we need to add. Okay, so here we're going to add the name. We're also going to add the email. So the AI is so intelligent, the phone. And then instead of address, it's going to be join date, right? And once again, this shouldn't be a string, this should be a date column, but just for the demo purposes, we're going to keep it string so that it's simple, right? So now let's save it, let's run it, and then let's go into the database and make sure it's there. And member here it is, and it seems that it has everything that it needs. Okay, now let's go ahead and create the final table, which is basically the borrow table, and then it has this foreign key and this foreign key, and we have to connect them to the proper tables, right? So because we named everything like book and the primary key we used it as ID, it's already going to know with our syntax. So let's go ahead and create the borrow table. Okay, now let's go into the code, and here let me open up the image. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create okay, so it already knows that it's connected to the member ID, so I'm gonna put it here. It already knows that it's connected to the book ID, so this is the power of Copilot, right? It also knows that it needs a borrow date. It also knows that it needs a return date. It's crazy how the Copilot is just autofilling everything for me. And I think that's it, right? So we have the ID, which is the borrow ID. We have the member ID, the borrow date, the return date, and the book ID. This is all that we need. So now let's go ahead and run the migration. And let's go ahead and look at that table. It was called borrow. And let's refresh. Okay, so something is not right here. Wait, did it give an error? Oh, I didn't save the file. Okay, so in this case, because I didn't save the file, you can we can roll back, right? So let's just do a rollback so that it removes that table, and we can run it again. So let's refresh. Borrow table is gone. Now let's run it again. It's because I forgot to save the file, right? Let me make sure it's saved now. Yes, it's saved. So let's go ahead and run it. Now let's go ahead and check the borrow table. And here it is. It has everything. It has the member ID and the book ID, which are foreign keys to other tables. And the Laravel is going to know that they're foreign keys to the table. So this finalizes our tutorial. This is the whole structure of it. And I hope that you have enjoyed it. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.